You know, twins are always kind of difficult. I heard somebody say twins are two things you're never prepared for. But when your twins are fighting in the womb, that's a whole different thing. You wonder, you know, if how you see wrestling on television, if they were throwing each other down on the floor of the womb or something, and or maybe using their fists but at any rate, these two guys were in the womb of a lady named Rebecca, who happened to be the wife of a guy named Isaac, or Itzhak, as they would pronounce it in Israel, which back in that day was the sound of laughter. Itzhak, 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 you know. If he were named today, we would call him ha 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 ha. So Itzhak's probably better. At any rate, when birth time comes, Esau is born first. Now that's a very significant thing. It means that he is the eldest, therefore he gets the birthright and all kinds of privileges that are not available to the younger. It's almost as if the younger's not there. But the scripture informs us that Rebekah, and I'm fascinated at this, not Isaac, but Rebekah, inquired of the Lord about this. And the Lord told her that the elder would serve the younger. And the promise then would go to the younger, the messianic promise. So Esau was born first. But Jacob, who he was named this afterward, he wasn't through fighting, man. He reached out and grabbed him by the heel as if to say, get back in here. We've got to fight some more. And so they named him Jacob, which means heel catcher, which, well, loosely translated means dirty, sneaky thief. How would you like to grow up with a name like that? You go to school and they call the roll. Dirty, sneaky thief, here, you know. You go to the bank to get a loan to go into business, and your name, sir? Dirty, sneaky thief. Oh, yeah. Well, we find that Jacob lived up to his name. Now, one thing you need to see in this is that Esau was a man's man. You know, he was a guy with a lot of hair. He was a National Rifle Association member. He was the hunter. He was the bodybuilder. He was the guy who could be governor of California. I mean, all kinds of goodies and so forth. And he stunk. But he was Dad's favorite. Jacob, well, you know, Jacob wasn't hairy at all. He was kind of smooth and kind of tender sort of guy. He was a homebody and spent a lot of his time in the kitchen. But he was still a dirty, sneaky thief. Catching Esau in a moment of great hunger, he dirty, sneaky thiefed the birthright out of him. Now, this gives you a pretty good idea of how unimportant Esau considered that to be anyway. Who wants that? I'm going back hunting, you know. I wonder if he combed the hair on his body. I don't know if he was that hairy or not. Well, obviously, you know, you can be pretty sure that things weren't coming together very well. And when Isaac was old and could barely see, and Rebekah knew he's about to go, and Esau wants that birthright back. So she does a camouflage job, you know. She puts a hairy thing on him and one that had a little bit of a stink to it, you know, as if he had been out in the field or so forth. And so he comes and fools his dad, who says, you know, you smell like and you feel like Esau, but you sound like Jacob. But nonetheless, he gets the blessing. Well, the fight went on. In fact, So much so that Jacob has to leave home. He has to run away because Esau was going to kill him. Typical. It's almost amazing that it hadn't happened before they were born. And so Jacob goes off to a place that his uncle lived. You see, Rebekah had a brother named Laban. Now, Jacob was about to meet his match. You know, Laban was a dirty, sneaky thief also from the get-go. And on the way there, Jacob meets his future. Oh, it was love at first sight. Oh, this girl that's willing to water his camels and be a nice servant, you know, and just sweet just came everywhere out of her. And he fell deeply in love with Rachel. Oh, man. Now, this is the kind of scene that Hollywood likes. I mean, they like this kind of thing. This is a story they like to have, and they like to put it on the screen. Yeah, oh man, here's a guy, he's being driven away from home so he won't be killed, and lo and behold, he gets the beauty queen. So he goes to his uncle Laban and he said, I want to marry Rachel if it's okay with you. He says, I love it, man. You're my first choice anyway. And the only thing that you have to do is work for 7 years for her. Now, I've worked for my wife for 7 years after we married. Actually, longer than that. But I don't know what I would have done if her dad had said to me, you know, I'd love to have you as my son-in-law. And I'm not sure he wanted that when he first met me, because I played football. I was playing football for a college, and or having it played on me, actually, mostly. And I played football before they had face masks. Explains some things, doesn't it? And they shaved my head for hazing, and so when I first met her folks, I was all beat up. I mean, my face had contusions and everything, and I didn't even have a neck, you know, and I'm bald. And later on, and that's when I went and said, could I have your daughter? Later on, I asked my dad, my father-in-law, Dad, you remember when you first met me? Oh, yeah. Well, what'd you really think? Oh, we love you, Gayle. I know, but what did you really think? We love you, Gayle. You know, he would never tell me what he really thought. But this is an incredible story. Laban says, yes, I want you to have Rachel, and all you have to do is work 7 years. Well, you know, when you're working, when you got two dirty, sneaky thieves together, it's just an exciting story. And the time came at the end of 7 years, which to Jacob was like a day, man. It was days, 7 days, not 7 years. Oh, Rachel, oh, can't wait. So wedding night comes. Now, folks, they didn't have incandescent lights like this. And the wedding tent would probably have been rather dark, maybe one small little oil lamp with one little thing, you know. And in that darkness, oh, he goes in to be with his bride. And he wakes up the next morning when the sun is shining and he can see a little better, and it's Leah! Leah! Leah was Rachel's older sister. Now, we're not sure that this is true. I think Laban made it up because he was a dirty, sneaky thief. And he said, oh, don't you understand? The older sister has to be married first. Oh, man. Now, I need to explain something about Leah. That was about the only way she probably could get married. The word Leah, now we've redeemed it today. It's a good name. I know many people named Leah, and I don't want those people named Leah to be upset by this, but back then, Leah had two meanings. One was wild cow. Now, this is kind of an oxymoron, see, because cows have been domesticated like forever, you know, but what he is saying here is you're impossible. But it also means weary. And with this, he's saying, you weary me. Obviously, he wasn't that much in love with this older daughter, but there was something else about her that made her probably unattractive. She had some kind of eye problem, you know, weak eyes, and so it's probably she had to squint a lot, you know, and you know how it goes. He wanted Rachel. And Hollywood would want him to have Rachel. So Laban says, you can still have Rachel, but it's just 7 more years of labor. Now, it seems to me from what I kind of detect in Scripture, he had to do the 7 more years, but he gave her Rachel anyway right then. Now, here's something that sometimes we don't pay attention to. Back in that day, if you had no children, if you were barren, as they would put it, as far as they were concerned and their understanding, it meant that you were cursed. Rachel had no children. But Leah, she's popping them out one right after another, you know. And all the famous names are coming from her. But finally, in his old age, and Isaac was kind of old to begin with. There's not much about Isaac that's complimentary, you know. He apparently just sat around the house, and his dad had to send him away to get a wife and so forth. Had to do something for him. But now his son Jacob has married 2 women now. Now that'll always give you problems, actually. When you read about Solomon and how many wives he had, plus his one lady who had stopped in one of the Kansas highways, and somebody said, well, what are you looking at? She said, well, I've never seen a concubine working. No, that's a combine. That's not the same thing. And so, I'm sorry, folks, this is... But when you see how many wives and concubines that Solomon had, you can understand why his heart went astray. But now the thing is, until his really old age, Rachel was barren. And finally, she had a son, Joseph. Joseph. Now, this family, folks, I've come to the conclusion that we're all from dysfunctional families. Somehow or other, you know, every one of us have dysfunctional families. But God somehow does his job and redeems all of that. It was true in my home. My parents were great, but my father's injury had turned our family into a backward kind of family and dysfunctional and deep in poverty and the like. And so here was a different kind of dysfunctional family. As far as Jacob was concerned, he only had one son. Just one. Joseph. Because Joseph came from Rachel. What was dinner like at that house? You know, they're gathered around the table, you know, and these other kids who were older than Joseph, wondering, why does Dad hate us? Why does he hate our mama? Why does he just like Rachel? This was tough. In fact, not only did Jacob consider Joseph his only son, he magnified it. He gave him clothing, man, kind of like Dale's shirt over here, just really fancy and colorful and so forth, man. The kind of clothing that only special people get. Royalty even Now, here's the thing. That would almost signal like, hey, he's the oldest from Rachel, so the messianic line must come through him. And I've discovered that a lot of people think that the line of the Messiah came through Joseph. Well, also because he had put the fancy clothes on him, it meant that Joseph didn't do any work. He was hired mostly to go out and find out what bad things the other brothers were doing and come and tell. I saw you. And that certainly helped the family a lot. It brought them together in unity. And then finally, after one more son was born to Rachel, and Jacob, in his great age, named him Benjamin. Now, folks, let me get just a little earthy here. Benjamin means son of my strength. Folks, this was an advertisement on his part. He said, I just want you to know I still have a child. I mean, it was an advertisement. And we've also, I have a lot of friends named Benjamin, and I think it's great, and sometimes I will tell them what your dad was trying to say when he named you, but not always. Well, finally, Joseph had a dream. Now, it's okay to have a dream. It was a prophetic kind of dream, and you don't always have to tell everybody what kind of dreams you have. You can just have the dream and live with it, but he had to advertise this. Hey, guess what, guys? I had a dream. He's telling his brothers. And guess what? I was one particular shock of wheat, and all of your shocks of wheat bowed down to me. Now, what are you supposed to start to do? Did you hear what he had to say? That crazy kid, who does he think he is? But then he made it worse. Oh, and by the way, I also had in this dream where the moon and the stars bowed down to me. Well, that would have been his mom and dad. That was it. Nobody was happy with him anymore. However, Joseph continued his tattletale job, and one time out to see the guys, and they were not doing good things. They said, we've had enough of this dude, so let's do away with him. And they were ready to kill him. And they were going to make sure there was plenty of blood on his coat so that they could show his dad it was an animal that got him. What could we do? Now, one of the guys saved his life. They decided not to kill him. So they put him in a hole and waited to wonder what they would do. And then, guess what? Some Ishmaelites. Oh, that's another part of a story, isn't it? That goes way back. And my, do we ever see the prophetic thing that happened with Ishmael and Isaac happening here today between Isaac and Ishmael, the Jews and the Arabs or Muslim. Wow. And the Bible said it would be this way. This is about all the proof you need that the Bible knows what it's talking about. Well, anyway, they sold him to this guy, these people coming through who were Ishmaelites. And they did that because Judah said, I can't handle our killing our own flesh. Let's just send him away. And that's what they did. And so he goes off to Egypt and is sold to someone else. But man, his clothes are a little different right now. They're not as fancy as they had been. His dad has the clothes, and oh, my one son. Well, Benjamin counts now because he was from Rachel, although Rachel died when Benjamin was born. It was a sad thing around that house. Boy, I do have Benjamin now, so I still have one son, and he ignored the others. Leah tried to get him to love her, but just didn't really succeed. It was a tough thing. But now Joseph eventually, after some real trials, and he had to have these. Now, I need to tell you that I have heard from a number of people that Joseph was the one person in the Bible that they felt had no sin in his life. And I'm thinking, are you reading the same Bible I'm reading? And do you see Joseph the same way I did? For one thing, we find out later on that he didn't even believe his own dream, because when they captured him, he begged him, like it was going to happen, not to kill him. He cried, "Oh, please don't kill me." So he was afraid that the dream wasn't true. But now he gets accused wrongly and is thrown of going after Potiphar's wife. By the way, I have another little feeling about this. See, Potiphar's wife had been after Joseph quite a bit already. Now, Joseph was hired by Potiphar. He should have gone to Potiphar and explained to him, "Sir, here's a problem we're having at the house, and I need to clue you into this." But I have a feeling that Joseph was just kind of a little bit, attracted by the temptation. Sometimes we love the temptation. And this might have been what was going on with him, and that's why he didn't talk to Potiphar about it. I think smart would have done that. But at any rate, it finally came to the point where he had to escape with his coat in her hands. And she accused him. And Potiphar had him thrown in jail. Well, it was bad enough that his brothers sold him, but it was bad enough that Potiphar's wife did this, but it's like just going from bad to worse. Now he's in jail. Huh. Now, if I were him, I know what I would be talking about to God. Look, let's talk this over, God. I thought I heard from you. Remember? You did not tell me that I was going to have to go through this to get there. I'll give you an idea. I had a family that came to a church I was serving once, and here was their statement. We've decided to really get back with God, and that's why we're coming to church. And we want you to know we're going to support the church, and the like. And so you'll love to hear this. It's nice. But they weren't there the second Sunday, and they called me and they said, "We had a flat on the way to church, and if that's the way God's going to treat us, we're not coming back." And I said, "We will miss you." But, Joseph could have said, look, if this is the way I'm going to get treated with all of this prophecy stuff and my being, son of Jacob, forget it. But all that he had to go through and saving lives even while he was in prison, and finally knowing the dream meaning of the Pharaoh. Now, to continue this story a little bit faster, Joseph had the answer to the coming recession, you might say, the coming famine, the climate change that was going to happen back then too. And as a result, he became the number 1.5 guy in the kingdom. He was top dude, man. Now, he even married the daughter of one of the priests, which, I have a little trouble with that, because that meant he was buying into the religion of Pharaoh in that country, which, by the way, tended to change with the pharaohs. And of course, now the famine drives his brothers down to see if they can get help from the one place that had it. They had no idea what had happened to Joseph. None of them did. It was a tough time. In fact, the worst thing in the world is to have to go to Egypt to get food. But when those brothers arrived, they didn't recognize Joseph. See, he would have looked like an Egyptian, I mean, with the kind of hair and thing. And I don't know, maybe he would have had one of those things they like to hang out of their jaw or something that indicates that they are. I find all of the decorations are fascinating. But one of the things I love as I journey around is I find young people do things with their hair I've never seen done before. And I walked up to a guy who had, and this was in church, who had his hair in a fan, a big fan, you know, front to back. And I go walking up to him, and I know he is about to think, oh boy, he's going to jump on me because of my hair. But I fooled him. I said, hey, I'll trade hair with you. He didn't know what to say. He didn't do it. But Joseph, when he saw that this was his brothers, went away and he wept. All the memories that might have flooded back. Now here is something I want you to take note of, because this is where I believe Joseph actually sinned. This one I can pinpoint. I mean, the disbelief I can pinpoint. I think buying into the priestly family there, I have trouble with. But I guess I can take that. But now Joseph begins a serious problem, I think, in the way he treats his brothers. I'm convinced that if Joseph at that moment had revealed himself to them, they would have been on the floor on their faces begging for forgiveness, and that would have been all that needed to happen. But oh no, we're going to play with them a bit, you know. Let's yank their chain a few times here. And so he goes through this series of things that put them under extreme pressure, and then finally he says, are you all of them? Well, no, we got one other brother. Well, if you don't bring your brother, you're not going to see my face again. And oh man, in the course of this, it was anguish, because they knew, even though these brothers and the family was disjointed, they knew that their dad saw that one as the only son he had left. And we can't do this. Well, by his trickery, which I think was being sinful here, you'll just have to forgive me for this, the way he treated his brothers, finally, he has Benjamin in his possession. And he threatens his life. Now, I don't know about you, but I would think, if I were one of those other guys, I'd say, hey, this is great. We can get rid of both of them. You know? I don't know who this other guy is, but Joseph is gone, and now if Benjamin's gone too, we're rid of it. We're the only sons he's got. But something happened. You see, the firstborn of Leah was Reuben. The situation back then was Reuben would be the one through whom the line came. The elder had that kind of expectancy. Now, God wasn't as much into that as they were in their tradition, which we find, because, you know, the one that God picks really and says, your kingdom's going to be the one that will, on whom, that will always exist, was David. And not only was he the youngest, he was a shepherd, and all of that put together, it was like the last one you would expect. The other guys looked like kings, but David didn't. And so it would be expected that Reuben would be the one. But Reuben really messed up. Boy, did he mess up. But then the line should have gone to the next person. But something happened on this kind of final meeting with Joseph before they knew who he was. That Judah, he's kind of down the line. Judah comes to Joseph, not knowing it's Joseph, and he says, "Sir, I can't do this to my father. I just can't do this to my father. Would you please keep me, and if you have to kill anyone, let him go back and take me in his place." Now, what does that sound like? That sounds like there's one person in that family who's finally getting it right and being, shall we say, a redemptive and others-centered person. You see, my radio program I call the Jesus Style, and every message, if you haven't noticed yet, you're going to find the nature of Jesus is working its way out through here, even in those very ancient times. And he says, "Please, let me take his place." Now, here's a Gayle Erwin belief. At that moment, I can see the Lord looking down and saying, "There he is. There he is. The line will come through him." Not Reuben, not any of the others, no. Judah. And Jesus became the Lion of the tribe of Judah. Wow. What a shock. I mean, things aren't going right. Judah's the one. This is not the way it's supposed to be. Well, God has a different way of judging people than we tend to. And now the reunion really occurs. And everybody's crying and falling on each other's shoulders and making up and begging forgiveness, and it's being granted because they saw that at least they were still alive. They were not dead. And now they have to leave home because there's no food there. So he says, "Well, come on down to Egypt. We'll take care of you." Something happened on the way. Certain instructions came to them that also speaks of the very nature of Jesus in terms of the instructions that Joseph gave them. Look at it this way. If I'm the brother of the number 1 1/2 guy in the nation that everyone knows and everyone respects and everyone even fears, and I come to the border and they say, "Who are you and why do you want to come to this land?" I'd say, "Hey, does your name Joseph mean anything to you? That's my brother." I'm good at dropping names, you know. If I meet someone famous, you're going to know about it. You know, how often I tell the story, especially in this country and in this neighborhood, of the time I interviewed Johnny Cash. You know, I've got a lot of mileage out of that. Until when we were having, I think it was our 45th wedding anniversary, and we had decided to make it a big photograph day. You know, and so my wife and I had all of our photographs, and we got a lot of them, you know, out for everybody to see and so forth. And I said to my grandkids, "Be sure and see the stack of pictures with your grandpa and Johnny Cash." You know what they said? "Yes, who is Johnny Cash?" I said, "Forget it." You know? But he gave them some very special instructions. He said, when you come to the border, they're going to ask you what you do, who you are. And here's what I want them to tell you. Don't tell them you are Joseph's brother. Now, I would want to do that. I cross borders a lot. I don't like borders, but I have to cross them. I'm working on, I forget which, every passport I've ever had, I've had to have them add more pages to it, you know. And that just had it happen to the one I've got now, which means I've crossed a lot of borders. Sometimes they don't care. I remember one border I crossed, and the guy didn't even know I was there. He just took my passport, looked straight ahead, and went. I thought, well, you did your job. Now, at least I want to tell them, you know, when they say, who are you? I'd like to say, well, I'm a mighty teacher of the things of God, and I have come to change your country and to take over. I've learned not to do that, you know. That would be awfully pretentious to begin with. But I've learned not to do that. I've learned from this event right here. He said, when you get to the border and they ask you who you are and why you have come, tell them, you're just shepherds. We just take care of cattle. Well, what's the problem with that? He said, they despise shepherds. What? You're come on now, Joseph. Let us get a little bit more elevated than that. Can't we just tell them that we are ranchers? That we sort of, you know, give the directions and the other people take care of it? No, no. Just tell them you're shepherds, because they despise shepherds. Oh, man. So they come to the border. Who are you? Well, we're just shepherds. That's all. Oh, shepherds. You're no problem. Come on in. We'll even give you the land of Goshen, our best land. Now, you would think hey, if we really come in and impress them, they'll give us the land there, you know, but they will always have guards on hand for you because they won't trust you. But man, if you're despised ones, we don't care. Come on in. I've discovered that's the best way to approach life. I had a man once say to me, and I'll never forget it. He said, I learned years ago, he said, if you have a choice between two roads, take the despised one, because you will never go wrong there. And I heard that, and I've tried to follow that. And I'm happy with what God has done. Because he tells us to be humble, you know. He says, I'm meek and lowly in heart, and you'll find rest for your soul. And when you take the despised way, you know that they don't mind that you did. You know, you don't add to the traffic problem on the other road. Oh, yeah, well, he's over there. I don't know why he took that road, but it's all by himself. Well, I need to bring this to a close because something has gone on here that I really want you to hear too, and is seldom paid note to. Although Joseph is important, and we often see him as a type of Christ, you know, because of his redemptiveness and saving the nation, and that is, in typology, they call it a type of Christ. But yet, a lot of people think that the line came through Joseph, but it didn't. It came through Leah and Judah. Now, by this point, Hollywood wouldn't even be interested in this story anymore. You know, oh man, we were counting on Rachel, and then you had to go and let her die with her last kid. And man, the guy who really Reuben looked like he should be the one through whom the line could come, and he messed up. In fact, Hollywood would like to show how he messed up. But God says, no, the line's going to come through Judah. In fact, his brother is going to be the way the priests will come. His brother Levi, another of Leah's children, her sons. And the whole thing is coming around the despised wife. The one maybe not very attractive in that day. Not the one that Jacob would have chosen ever. Once when my son and I were traveling together, and we were in a mountainous area, and as we turned in one curve, suddenly we looked out over a valley that was absolutely gorgeous. And we were both oohing and aahing over it. And I said to him, you know, son, that is one of the disproofs of evolution, because there is no evolutionary reason why that should be beautiful to us. Doesn't even fit in with that. And then he said something that I thought was brilliant. You know, he's done that a couple of times. He said, you know, Dad, I bet human beauty, the way we judge it, is a result of the fall of mankind. To God, everyone is beautiful. But after the fall, we started dividing them up, you know, into the beauty queens and then the junkyard dogs and so forth. And God doesn't do that. To Him, everyone's beautiful. And I can almost hear God saying something to Leah that just thrills me. You see, one of the things I have realized in my great age is that no woman on the face of this earth thinks that she is beautiful enough. You just don't. Even the models who maybe rake down $10,000 or $20,000 an hour for posing spend half of that for stuff to, you know, make them more beautiful. None of us think that we are good looking enough. But I want you to sort of hear maybe the words of God to Leah. Leah, I know your dad didn't love you. And I know that your husband didn't love you. But Leah, I love you. And Leah, I think you are absolutely gorgeous. In fact, I just love you so much, Leah. I want you to be one of my mothers, okay? Wow. Now, I'm going to really kind of push you ladies a bit here tonight. You see, that wasn't the only time. Because when Jesus had the opportunity to elevate Mary, He didn't. He never did. You know, they come to get Him in Mark chapter 3 because they thought He had lost His mind. They thought He was beside Himself. That's their way of saying crazy. And the reason, and I love this, that they thought He was going crazy was because He wasn't eating lunch. There was just such big crowds, He wasn't eating lunch. Jesus was into eating, folks. Anyway, they come to get Him. She and her brothers, Mary and her brothers, come to get Jesus. And the word comes down, your mother and brothers are here. And what does Jesus say? Oh, great, I hope she brought lunch. No. Who is my mother? Who are my brothers? And He looks around and He says, here is my mother and my brothers and my sister. Whoever does the will of my Father, that is my mother and my brother. So ladies, if you're brave enough and someone says, who are you? You can say, I'm a mother of Jesus. I haven't met anyone that brave yet. But He also authorized you to say, I'm His sister. And guys, He authorized you to say, I'm His brother. Wow. Not a bad deal, you know? Not a bad deal. And with that, Jesus shows his incredible other-centeredness in that he takes one that the world would reject and says, I want you to be my mother. And then he says to us after that, if you do my Father's will. And boy, I haven't talked to you about that, and I don't know that I'll get to on this visit, but I firmly believe that if you want to do his will, you cannot miss it. It's not his will isn't, oh man, I hope I can find his will. Which clump of trees is it hidden under? Where's the golden egg? No, 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 no. God doesn't deal with us that way. If you want to do his will, you cannot miss it. If you have trouble with that, ask me afterward and I'll prove it. And so that puts us in a situation of doing his will and being his mother or his brother or his sister and so forth. That's the love of God. He elevates everyone who loves him back. And that brings me back to love God with all you got and then love your neighbor as yourself. And it becomes so simple. Amen. Amen. God bless you.